this edition of Aldermen at Work. I'm your host, Dan DeMana, Media Manager for the City of Somerville. Joining us tonight is Alderman at Large Dennis Sullivan. Alderman Sullivan grew up in East Somerville. He's a former school committee member and chairman, and he was elected as an at-large alderman in 2003. He is a sergeant with the Department of Correction and assigned to the EAP, Employee Assistance Program, assisting officers and personnel with stress, personal and medical issues. He was a combat medic in the Mass National Guard at the Highland Ave Armory for 6 years. He is a graduate of St. Clement High School, Curry College, and he has a certificate from the Harvard Kennedy School Rappaport Institute on Municipal Governments and Public Policy Program. Alderman Sullivan, thanks very much for joining us.
Daniel, it's a pleasure to be back on the Aldermen at Work.
Great. Let's start off with something that you brought up recently to the board, synthetic marijuana. This is marketed in stores as herbal incense or spice. It contains chemicals, these chemicals that are essentially artificial cannabinoids. So you smoke it, you get high the same way you do with marijuana. There's some dangerous effects involved with it. Through September, the American Association of Poison Control Centers reports that they've gotten 6,310 calls for effects from synthetic marijuana compared to 3,682 calls for all of last year. So it's almost doubled. So obviously this is something that's on the rise. You brought it up as something that potentially the city should address through ordinance and maybe something the board could pass in order to prevent this from being available in the community. Can you talk a little bit about how it came to your attention?
Sure. It came in several different ways. My work in the Department of Correction, recently I no longer work in the Employee Assistance Program. I'm back working inside a correctional facility, and I have dealt with people that have smoked K2, a host of effects, negative effects it's having. It's an hallucinogen. The problem with K2, from my understanding, from my reading, from my education, from my professional background, is that the compounds keep changing in the substance, and thus having a different effect on people. It can make people become agitated. It can cause a false seizure. Relatively healthy people having seizures that they've never had before. It can become violent or overly lethargic. It keeps changing the compound in it. If you go into a store, and I did a survey in Somerville, an impromptu survey. I went to different stores, and not too many people are selling them, or if they were selling it, no longer, which is good, but you can still get it here in Somerville. It's marketed towards young people. The Incredible Hulk is the packaging, Scooby-Doo snacks. It says not for human consumption, but people are using it, in the way they shouldn't. It's approximately $5 a packet. It's geared towards kids, and I don't see any use for it, why we should have it in the city at all. It's just not something that's healthy. It's having a derogatory effect. It's causing addiction among young people, and that's who it's geared to. I've had people call me up and say, well, it's better than smoking marijuana. From my research, it definitely has no medical value at all, and I think we have to get rid of it totally.
Do you know how? I don't know this. Do you know how it's legal? I mean, it seems like this product is sometimes just sold in just basic convenience stores, and they put the not for human consumption on it, but it almost seems like an obvious loophole that everybody knows. Just because you put it on the package, we all know what it is and how it's being used. Do we have any sense of the legality of it and how? And have you seen any other communities that have since passed any ordinances to ban its sale within the community?
City of Boston has passed an ordinance, $300 fine to the vendor who's selling it. It's interesting. The day that I proposed it here in Somerville, New York Senator Schumer, a U.S. Senator, he had a press conference, and basically it's supposed to be illegal across the country, but getting back to the compound, it keeps changing. That's how they get around it. A lot of these items are from China. They're not regulated. Who knows what's happening in it? The long-term effects could be genetic, some of the studies that I've read. So they're getting around it by the changing compound.
Mm-hmm. Like permanent damage, especially for somebody who might be young and growing, which you're saying that these products are marketed towards with packaging with cartoon or comic book characters on it.
And not just from my work experience, but from different groups in Somerville. We have an opioid problem here, as do many communities are struggling with. But when I go to these forums, this issue comes up, and I think it's a simple step. Let's ban it. Let's fine the vendor $300, and they'll think twice before selling it. And I just do not see any value at all into selling it.
I was going to say that you don't see any value, and I was going to play devil's advocate. And this is kind of a softball devil's advocate, but could you make the argument of, well, if it's regulated, if you're an adult and you're 21 plus, you should be able to choose to buy and ingest this product if you want?
No, but if you look at the research, emergency rooms are increased calls to emergency rooms. It's taking our resources away that can be used in other areas. That question was brought to my attention. Do I want it regulated? No, I want it banned. I want to be very clear. I want to ban it here in Somerville. And that doesn't mean someone can't get it in another community, but that might be the impetus for, say, an Arlington or a Cambridge to ban it too. It might, I think it's going to be a step in the right direction. I'm not so naive to think that if we ban it, that it's unobtainable, but I think it will definitely help.
Okay. I'd like to change gears to something else that you brought up to the board as a possibility. Requiring tables for parents to be able, or guardians, caretakers, to be able to change their children in bathrooms. You had an experience in particular that brought this idea to your attention when you were eating at a restaurant or Assembly Row. Tell me about your experience. What happened?
Well, my experience, it was the day of the Somerville cleanup. I came home, my wife and my baby Jacqueline, who's 15 months now, and she was probably less than a year at the time. So I said, let's go to Assembly and have lunch, and we did. And we went to Earl's and had a beautiful lunch, but before I got in there, I wanted to wash my hands, and my wife said, Dennis, will you change the baby? No problem at all. I went in, and they had all these nice tables, these leather-bound, chairs. And I said, where is the changing table? And they said, oh, we don't have one. And they said, there's the chair, and the baby's moving around. Any public, pretty much every public facility, excluding City Hall, has them. It just makes sense, I think, from a safety standpoint. So I brought the baby back out thinking maybe they only had them in the female room. And to my wife's chagrin, and she let me have it, and she just, it was, the impetus was my wife. It made sense, I think, from a safety standpoint, from a sanitary standpoint. Someone has to go in and use that chair at some point, maybe, that we just changed baby Jacqueline, at. I just think it just makes sense in so many ways. We have ADA compliance. I mean, this is a changing table, I think, is about $100 for an establishment. Not a lot of money, doesn't take a lot of room up. I think it's sensible.
And we're starting to see some more of it. Like I've noticed myself, you go into some restaurants and it wasn't quite as prevalent before. You're starting to see more of them now, but they're certainly not everywhere yet. And in a lot of cases, not a lot of cases, I wouldn't know myself because I haven't gone to a lot of women's bathrooms, but women's bathrooms would often have them, not necessarily the men's bathrooms. And it's really a case where both should have it because both are equal caretakers.
Right, and I can tell you as a new parent, my eyes are wide open when it comes to these type of issues for accessibility, for baby carriages. And I want to point out the day, and Earl's has them now, to their credit, I want to congratulate them. But the day we went into that restaurant, it was a parking lot for baby carriages. There had to be 20 baby carriages parked that we parked into, you know what I mean? So there was definitely a need. It made sense. State of California legislature passed a bill calling for it, but Governor Jerry Brown said leave it up to the businesses.
Yeah.
I can see it both ways, but I think a responsible business, especially in Assembly Square, we want people to live, work, and play, and that includes our babies, and it just makes sense.
Yeah, especially if you want to have a family-friendly city, you can see where that would come into play. You mentioned the California bill, which, as you mentioned, was passed by the legislature, but then vetoed by the governor. He said, leave it up to the private sector, and they'll work it out. But are you aware of any on like a municipal level, local city or town? Because I didn't quite see one. I did a little bit of looking around, didn't see one. Are you aware of any?
I'm not.
Yeah.
Not
so
at all.
Somerville could lead the way on that one.
Right, and I got to get, if we do go that way, hopefully I have to give a lot of credit to my wife, Melissa.
On another subject, you are chairman of the Land Use Committee.
Correct.
Still on the Board of Aldermen, and kind of back on marijuana, but in this case, medical marijuana, approved by the voters. I can't remember how many years ago that was, but so That's still in process, but there's a proposed ordinance right now before the Board of Aldermen, which the Land Use Committee, it looks like, is going to take up next week, that would act as a temporary guide for the siting of medical marijuana dispensaries. It has been recommended, this ordinance, by the Planning Board to the Board of Aldermen. Right now, there isn't the zoning overhaul, the larger zoning overhaul does include this, but because that hasn't passed yet, this would act as a temporary placeholder that would kind of guide where these could possibly open up in Somerville until the full zoning overhaul passes. As of right now, applicants who want to open up a dispensary need to apply to the State Department of Public Health, and they need to have a letter of support from the city. And right now, Somerville is not sending any letters of support because they don't have this in place yet. Talking to you as chairman of the Land Use Committee, what you see in this ordinance and what you think it might be able to accomplish.
Right. It's a great question. Monday night, October 26th, the Land Use Committee will take up medical marijuana. And basically, the voters passed legalization of medical marijuana. The Attorney General, we can't say no to that. We have to zone where we're going to put that facility. So we're grappling with that right now. The Planning Department has issued a recommendation on what areas to put in, what commercial area. Some aldermen have expressed concern, especially the ward aldermen, that they don't want it too close to neighborhoods. I'd like to see it in a central business district, accessible by public transportation. We're going to work the details out, and we are mandated to do that. We can't say no. The Attorney General has been very clear, what our charge is, and I hopefully will have that done either Monday night or early in November. I believe mid-November is when we have to have it done.
Mm-hmm. Why would you like to see it in that central business district? What do you think the benefit is of having it centrally located, accessible, in a high traffic area?
Right. Well, it's medical marijuana. People have ailments. Putting it in the inner belt, way off the beaten path right now, there's no accessibility down there, doesn't make sense. And I think, it puts a stigma on it, on the medical marijuana. Whether you agree with it or not, people are using it to increase their appetite, cancer patients. It definitely has, conversely, from K2, it definitely has, medical value. So, I think it's incumbent upon the city, and in California, you see what's happened out there. I've had a chance to visit San Francisco several years ago, and it's right there like any other business. It's regulated. We have to do a good job at regulating it, making sure that it's doing the right thing in that business, the rules that we establish. But I think putting it off the beaten path, like in a commercial area, would just, like down in the inner belt right now is wrong. And I have high hopes for the inner belt, but right now, I don't think that's where it belongs.
Mm-hmm. So kind of the idea that, if you tuck it away, you're putting a stigma on it and maybe even inviting people to maybe abuse it. I'm sure that there's the people who could try to potentially abuse that as well. If you put in a central business district, you're saying it's here, people voted for it, and it should be...
Right.
Sunshine is the best disinfectant.
Exactly, out in the open, and I think that's where we'll get the best chance to make sure that people are doing the right thing, being law-abiding.
Okay. That also, we have some time, so that could also transition into a discussion about the proposed zoning overhaul, because that zoning overhaul that was put forth by the city, Board of Aldermen took a look at it, a lot of comments, a lot of feedback. I think the city received the planning department received over 1,000 pieces of feedback on it. So we're going to take that, we're going to go back, do some revisions, come forth, hold some extra meetings, which I think might be actually coming up in the next couple of months. I think they're kind of gearing up for that. As chairman of the Land Use Committee, what did you see in the initial proposal that you liked, and what else were you looking at in the proposed zoning overhaul that you said, well, I think we can make an adjustment here or there?
Well, I like the fact that we're going to be a transit-oriented development, the whole city. You can, when the Green Line, hopefully when the Green Line comes to Somerville, and they're talking about delays right now given the costs, but when that happens, we'll be within 1 mile walking area, from the entire city. We just opened up Assembly Square, Orange Line stop at Assembly, first station in 25 years in the greater Boston area. So I like the fact that it's transient-oriented. the fact that we can get vehicles off the road. What I didn't like is that it was a very aggressive timeline that the administration was proposing. I felt that people did not understand it totally. I want to make sure that people understand how the zoning is going to affect their neighborhood. How the density is going to look. We took a step back. The zoning timed out. We took all that feedback that you mentioned, all the written requests, all the public hearing comments, and we're going to revise the zoning right now. The planning department, George Proakis, who we're very fortunate to have as our director of planning, is in the process of revising it. I'm going to take it up sometime. Hopefully November 30th is the date I'm looking for. If the studies are completed, we can start the process. We're going to have meetings around different items like open space, like mobility, like affordability, even the process, like starting out trying to rezone the whole city, and it opened my eyes. The process, people were complaining how the process was going to be. And, that's a valid comment. I want to take a look at the old zoning, but 11 aldermen that are involved, that are engaged, they had their thoughts on how the process should go. And as chairman, it's not my way or the highway. I try to do things collectively, and we're making progress. We have a map, if you will, on how to proceed regarding those different issues that are all important to everybody.
And if I recall correctly, I think last summer the process kind of started with the planning department. They had over the summer, I think it was every Wednesday or every Thursday night, they were having these meetings to talk about zoning on topics like that, and coming up with that first draft of it. So, and then putting forth that first draft, it's really about, all right, we've got this first draft. Let's take in all the feedback and take our time to make sure we get it right. Obviously, there's a lot going on with Somerville between the Green Line extension and such a hot real estate market, with or without the Green Line extension. Right. Everybody wants to build, but making sure that you take the time, pulling all that feedback, and get the best possible product.
Right, and as chair, there was a lot of kickback from the aldermen. A lot of aldermen didn't like it. Some wanted to kill it right away, but we took that process a little further down the line with all that feedback. We went as far as we could. The zoning timed out. We're going to have a revised zoning plan, and we're going to take a look at it again. And I would hopefully we can have this accomplished sometime by the summer of 2016, I'm hoping. I'm not trying to rush it. I want to make sure we have a measured approach, that people totally understand it. And I think we're going in the right direction. And I think even though it didn't pass, that it was fruitful. It was definitely constructive and beneficial to the process.
And so much of that, you mentioned how it really focuses on becoming a transit-oriented, really focuses on that transit-oriented development. I think Summer Vision, one of the things that they talk about is areas to transform, areas they want to enhance, kind of the commercial districts, especially around those Green Line stops, and then areas to preserve, wanting to preserve the neighborhoods. But so much of that hinges upon and is predicated upon the Green Line extension, and as you mentioned, it turns out that due to it seems that due to a unique bidding process that they did to try to accelerate the schedule, actually led to some higher than projected costs, and they said it could be anywhere to $700 million to $1 billion more than what they originally expected. So they've gone back; they're trying to pare that number back. How closely have you been following it, and what are your thoughts on that larger number and things that could be done to kind of break it back down?
I had NPR on this morning at 5:30, and I heard the director of transportation for the governor talking about some of the cost overruns, and they're trying to scale back any overages that they can do. I follow it very closely. Some people will say, I work in the state, and I work with a lot of people from around the state, and they think that, we've gotten the lion's share of the transportation dollars. And what I would say, as a school committee chairman before, Ward 1 school committee person, I-93 is literally, I would challenge you that we have the closest neighborhoods to I-93. We're an environmentally challenged city. We have high rates of asthma, high rates of, that these pollutants are causing from the highway. So we have to, I mean, this is not just because we want to be more transit-oriented. This is about the health of future generations. And we have suffered, and I think we have to do this. I've been following it. I know we have to find ways to pay for it. If it means, I don't want to put it off, but, we got to keep it on track. I know the mayor is committed to that, state delegation, and I'm doing everything I can. I've testified in the past at state public, at the State House regarding the transportation bill, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it happens.
When the mayor went to go speak, I think it was to the MassDOT board. They had a public meeting, and he gave a presentation. One of the things he brought up, it was an old photo of, I think it was during the 2004 World Series, and Somerville High School auditorium was packed with folks about the Green Line extension. A lot of them were holding signs that said environmental justice, and that's just what you were just talking about. Was the 93 came through, and it's something the mayor speaks about as well. And now we know the cafe studies that are going on with Tufts, and they're studying the effect of particulate matter that from car pollution on people's health and the increased rates of cardiovascular disease that can result from it. You're from East Somerville. You grew up in East Somerville. Do you remember this as a kid?
The nunnery grounds, better known today as the States Ave, Vermont Ave, Connecticut Ave, all the Minnesota Ave. It's literally right by a highway. For too long, we've been neglected. There's a fence right now being held together by plastic ties that falls down every winter. The aldermen always put orders in, asking the state delegation, but we have to do a better job at addressing those health concerns. If you go to Wilmington, Wakefield, even Medford, they have big walls or big partitions separating the highway from the neighborhood, yet they're not half as close as we are up there. I mean, that's my neighborhood. That's the neighborhood I hold near and dear. I think this is, this needs to get more attention. And I know that the reps and the senators have put that in, but it's died in a budget bill, from what I understand. And I'm going to, keep working with them to try to make it happen.
And you grew up in East Somerville. Now you live in 10 Hills, correct?
Correct.
So you're still near 93, and also you're near Assembly Square, where we saw an example of a T station that ended up opening up that was at risk because of the Great Recession. The city kind of worked with the developer down there and the state to try to make sure that it came to fruition, and everybody put the money in. Now they're talking about that kind of idea to make sure the Green Line extension stations happen, talking about maybe paring it back, and then people who are developing near it can feed into it. What do you think of that idea? Is that a feasible idea?
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be my first option to have, taxpayer money or future, like we did in Assembly Square with the IQ funding, meaning the bond that we set forth to put into that T station will get repaid with future revenues paid off by the taxes generated at Assembly Square. It's not my first option, but it's something that I would entertain. I am open to. I want to make sure, though, that it's a last resort, that we have to do this. But it's something that I am open to and I would entertain.
Great. Something else I wanted to touch upon is something that you seem to pride yourself on, based on your campaign website, is that you hold a lot of neighborhood office hours. So what do you do with this? You just setting up a table out on the street, putting on a sign like, "I'm here, come see me, talk to me about whatever you want"? Right.
I'll take an ad out in the Somerville Journal, their daily activities for the week, and I try to do 2 wards a weekend on Saturdays in the spring and in the fall. I do all 7 wards on a main thoroughfare. I try to go close to Dunkin' Donuts, and I like coffee, and I buy people coffee and donuts when they come. But like last Saturday, I was down in Ward 1 in front of the East Branch Library, and I had 3 people come up to me from different walks of life. Some seniors, one a retired school teacher in our school system, one a young mother, and one a single gentleman, complaining about nip bottles around the tree wells, from basically from the East Branch Library down to Sullivan Station. And I did take a walk, and lo and behold, nip bottles. I have an order going in tonight calling for an anti-litter campaign from from businesses. And also, I think businesses could be doing a better job at cleaning up in front of their, it's common sense. If you look at the old code of ordinances that we have, when I first got on, I've been elected I'm in my 18th year, it's hard to believe, but when I first got on the Board of Aldermen 12 years ago after the school committee, that was part of the ordinance that a storekeeper would have to sweep up in front of their store in the morning and at night. I mean, it holds true today. And, that's how we get things done with those office hours. That's just an example. I went down to Union Square in front of Dunkin' Donuts, and people were talking about Union United's proposal. And they were concerned about density. So, it's feedback that I use as an alderman that I find useful, and I'm representing those constituents. And I think that who knows better about their neighborhood than the people that live there.
Do you find you get different feedback when you're out in the neighborhoods like that for these office hours as compared to somebody who shoots you an email? Or do people reach out to you via social media like Twitter or Facebook
So
or anything?
I probably receive 250 emails a week. Not all have to be responded to. A lot of them are just informing me of an event that might be coming up. But I would say 50 to 60 emails need a response. In social media, I'm on Facebook. I tweet now, and obviously, all that stuff is good. But I don't think you can beat being out in the neighborhood with my table, and just talking to people one-on-one. I think we live in a society where people are too technology driven, and when I can, I like to go in those neighborhoods. And also during the winter, I've actually had office hours at Star Market, at the main branch library. People can come in, and some of the worst days in the winter, you wouldn't think people would show up, and I've had 6 or 7 people just talking about zoning. It's with a coffee and a donut, and I enjoy it.
That's great. Let's just hope that this winter there's not too much snow out there.
I'm praying.
Nothing like last winter. Let's hope. We've got a couple of minutes left. I just want to ask you a little bit about your growing up in East Somerville, in particular Halloween. Tell me about Halloween when you were growing up, because it's October, we're almost there.
Well, Halloween's a very special day for me. It's my birthday.
Oh.
I was born on Halloween, and I can remember, not me, mind you, but there were a lot of growing up in Somerville throwing eggs back in the East Somerville landscape was big back then. But, a lot of engaged families, trick-or-treaters. In 10 Hills, you're starting to see that come back more and more. I'm seeing more kids come back. The first year, kids came through and I ran out of candy. I had to make a run out to get more candy. This Halloween, my daughter Jacqueline, I'm looking forward with my wife going trick-or-treating. She's going to be a Patriots cheerleader, complete with pom-poms. And I'm just really excited. The holidays are coming up, Halloween, then we'll go right into Thanksgiving and Christmas. And it just means so much more to me now with a baby girl at home. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited about it.
Mm-hmm. And there's a haunted City Hall, I think, event that they're going to have again. You're going to be able to get up here for
that. Absolutely, definitely.
That's terrific.
And hopefully Jacqueline, she was old enough, she was born for Christmas, but Santa, she didn't really register. I think this year she'll probably be scared to death of Santa when it comes up.
You're not a parent until you have the photo of the child on Santa's lap crying, terrified.
That's right.
Of who is this guy?
That's right.
You mentioned she's going as a Patriots cheerleader. One last question. Patriots Jets Sunday. What's your prediction?
I think the Patriots are going to go undefeated this year. I think we're going to win the Super Bowl, and I'm very optimistic about our chances.
Terrific. Well, I think we're just about out of time, but I want to thank you very much for joining us again. And I'm Dan DeMena. This is Aldermen at Work. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much.